Hey everybody, how are you guys doing today? Welcome to the Mansplaining Mike show. I'm Mansplaining Mike, and we're gonna finish off part 2 of the Alfred, Kenzie, and John Money video. I tried to do it yesterday. I kept having technical difficulties, so hopefully today everything works and nothing falls down during the podcast or anything. None of the cameras fall. So let's see if we can get this done today. So John Williams Money was born the 8th of July 1921. He died the 7th of July 2006. He was a New Zealand American psychologist, sexologist, and professor at Johns Hopkins University, known for his research on human sexual behavior and gender, believing that gender identity was malleable within the first 2 years of life. Money advocated for the surgical normalization of the genitalia of intersex infants. Money advanced the use of more accurate terminology in sex research, coining the terms gender role and sexual orientation. I'd like to say he didn't advance anything that was more accurate. That stuff is just foolishness. Nobody thinks that stuff is real. Your gender identity. Look, you are what you're born as. You don't get to change what you are. And raising a boy as a girl isn't going to stop him from being a boy. And raising a girl as a boy isn't going to stop her from being a girl. And the case of David Raymer proves that. But Money had doctored a lot of the results, and we'll get into that later. But since the 1990s, Money's work and research has been subject to significant academic and public scrutiny. A 1997 academic study criticized Money's work in many aspects, particularly in regard to the involuntary sex reassignment of the child David Reimer. We're going to take a look at exactly why it was controversial. We're going to get more into David Reimer, and then we'll come back to John Money, but their stories are so interconnected you won't even realize that this is more about David than John. And we're going to talk about his twin brother as well. David Reimer was born Bruce Peter Reimer on the 22nd of August 1965, and he died May 4th, 2004. He was a Canadian man raised as a girl following medical advice and intervention after his penis was severely injured during a botched circumcision in infancy. The psychologist John Money oversaw the case and reported the reassignment as successful, even though it wasn't, and as evidence that gender identity is primarily learned. The academic sexologist Milton Diamond later reported that Reimer's realization that he was not a girl occurred between the ages of 9 and 11 years old, and that he was living as a male by the age of 15. Well known in medical circles for years, anonymously as the John Joan case, Reimer later went public with his story to help discourage similar medical practices. He ended up killing himself at the age of 38, so it really makes you wonder how John Money was saying any of this was successful. He was originally named Bruce, and his identical twin was named Brian. Their parents were Janet and Ron Reimer, a couple of Mennonite descent who had married in December of 1964. At the age of 6 months, after concern was raised about how both of the boys urinated, the boys were diagnosed with phimosis. They were referred for circumcision at the age of 7 months. General practitioner Jean Marie Huot performed the operation using the unconventional method of electrocauterization, but the procedure burned David's penis beyond surgical repair. The doctors chose not to operate on Brian, whose phimosis soon cleared up without surgical intervention. Sounds like Brian might have been all right had he not gotten the surgery as well. It's too bad, we'll never know. The parents concerned about their son's prospects for future happiness and sexual function without a penis took him to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore in early 1967 to see John Money, a psychologist who was developing a reputation as a pioneer in the field of sexual development and gender identity, based on his work with intersex patients. Little did they know, they took their sons to see a pedophile. I would argue he didn't even practice science. He just practiced pedophilia. Like a lot of radical leftist members of our government, Money was a proponent of the theory of gender neutrality, that gender identity developed primarily as a result of social learning from early childhood, and that it could be changed with the appropriate behavioral interventions. Man, I remember, what was it, like last year or the year before that, people were talking about babies. They were going to raise their kids as babies so that they could pick their own sexual identity later in life. It was insane. Like, you are what you're born as. There's no changing it. The Rabers had seen Money being interviewed in February of 1967 on the Canadian news program This Hour Has 7 Days, during which he discussed his theories about gender. Reimer was raised under the optimum gender rearing model, which was the common model for sex and gender socialization, medicalization for intersex youth. The model has been heavily criticized as sexist, but really it's just stupid and pedophilic. I don't know how it would be sexist. It's just trying to turn a boy into the opposite sex. It's stupid. I don't know how it would be sexist. But at that time, surgical construction of the vagina was more advanced than construction of the penis. And Money believed that Reimer would be happiest in adulthood, living as a woman with functioning genitalia. Additionally, for Money, a case where identical twin boys were involved, where one could be raised as a girl, provided a perfect test for his theories. I think it just gave him a perfect opportunity to practice pedophilia on these poor boys. I don't think it tested any of his theories, really, but proved them to be wrong, if anything. Money and the Hopkins family team persuaded the baby's parents that sex reassignment surgery would be in Reimer's best interest. So at the age of 22 months, David underwent a bilateral orchidectomy, in which the testes were surgically removed and a rudimentary vulva was constructed by genital plastic surgery. David was reassigned to be raised as female and given the name Brenda, similar to his birth name of Bruce. Seems like they still do that today. Like Rachel Levine calls himself Rachel, but his real name is Richard. So I guess they still don't get too far away from their, what do they call them, dad names or something? I don't know. Psychological support for the reassignment and surgery was provided by John Money, who continued to see Reimer annually for consultations and to assess the outcome. The reassignment was considered an especially important test case of the social learning concept of gender identity for two reasons. The first reason was Reimer's identical twin brother, Brian, made an ideal control because the brothers shared genes, family environment, and the intrauterine environment. Secondly, this was reputed to be the first reassignment and reconstruction performed on a male infant who had no abnormality or prenatal or early postnatal sexual differentiation. If all of that wasn't bad enough, wait until you guys hear what he started doing next. Because what he started doing next was disgusting, disturbing, and I don't know what you could call it besides pedophilia. Money reported on Reimer's progress as the John Joan case, describing apparently successful female gender development even after David informed his father at age 14 that he had always felt that he was a boy, bringing the experiment to an end. So there was no success. And according to John Colapinto, who published a biography of Reimer in 2001. The sessions with Money included what Money called childhood sexual rehearsal play. Money theorized that reproductive behavior formed the foundation of gender, and that play at thrusting movements and copulation was a key aspect of gender development in all primates. So starting at the age of 6, according to Brian, the twins were forced to act out sexual acts. I just want to point out, it's not only pedophilia, it's incest, because these two are brothers. With David playing the female role. Money made David get down on all fours, and Brian was forced to come up behind him and place his crotch against David's buttocks. Money also forced David in another sexual position to have his legs spread with Brian on top. And at least one occasion, Money took a photograph of the two children doing these activities. So child porn. So not only was he a pedophile, he was also a child pornographer, like taking pictures of the kids. When either child resisted these activities, Money, like any pedophile, would get angry. Both David and Brian recall that Money was mild-mannered around their parents, but ill-tempered when alone with them. When they resisted inspecting each other's genitals, Money got very aggressive, David said. He told me to take my clothes off, and I just did not do it. I just stood there, and he screamed at me, "Now, do it, now," louder than before. I thought he was going to give me a whooping, so I took my clothes off and stood there shaking. That's what David said. Money's rationale for these various treatments was the belief that childhood sexual rehearsal play was important for a healthy adult gender identity. It was important to get him off because he was a sexual deviant. That's what it was about. Both David and Brian were traumatized, with Brian speaking about it only with the greatest emotional turmoil, and David unwilling to speak about the details publicly. Although later his wife, Jane Fontaine, stated that David had privately told her the same story. Their parents state that Money's forced inappropriate therapy, like I said, it wasn't therapy, it was pedophilia, was responsible for both their early deaths, puberty and adolescence. We're going to get through like how their puberty and adolescence was. I'm sorry I didn't make that clear. But during puberty and adolescence, estrogen was given to David during adolescence, therefore inducing breast development. For several years, Money reported on Reimer's progress as the John Jones case. Money wrote the child's behavior is so clearly that of an active little girl and so different from the boyish ways of her twin brother. They're talking about a boy. They're talking about David. Again, I would just like to reiterate that this was a lie. Like, I've repeated it over and over, but every time I see him call it a success, I feel it's important to repeat that it's a lie. Like he was lying about the success because there was no success at all. The twins attended Glenwood School in Winnipeg. From the age of 14, David attended R.B. Russell Vocational High School. He eventually ceased attending school and was tutored privately. By the age of 13 years, Reimer was experiencing suicidal depression. He told his parents he would take his own life if they made him see Money again. But Money was telling us that it was successful. So you see how these people lie? And this whole gender ideology crap is based off of this. And it's based off of a lie. And it's based off something they know to be a lie. They're not saving any of these kids' lives. And the one time that they actually did this, well, what they called successfully, the kids committed suicide in early adulthood. So I don't know how any of this would be considered successful. And I still fail to see why the Democrats repeat it and try to get more kids to do it and more kids to commit suicide. It either has to be they hate children, which is real quite possible. I mean, they love abortions. They're always talking about aborting babies. And they want to have late-term abortions too. It seems like all some type of disgusting population control. Like if you don't agree not to have kids, they're just gonna mess up your kids' sexual organs, and they'll never be able to have kids anyway. So if they don't get them with the atrazine in the water, they're gonna get them by convincing them that they're really the opposite sex. Um, Finally, on the 14th of March 1980, Reimer's parents told him the truth about his sex reassignment. Following advice from Reimer's endocrinologist and psychiatrist, at the age of 14, having been informed of his past by his father, Reimer decided to assume a male gender identity, calling himself David. So he went back to being David, but Money was reporting that it was successful and he was living life as a girl. You can see exactly how deep of a lie it was, you know. He underwent treatment to reverse the reassignment, including testosterone injections, a double mastectomy, and phalloplasty operations. And I'm pretty sure none of them worked, like not all the way. He could never be a functioning man again, you know. Reimer worked in a slaughterhouse and then worked doing odd jobs. On the 22nd of September 1990, he married Jane Fontaine and would adopt her 3 children. His hobbies included camping, fishing, antiques, and collecting old coins. So he wasn't able to have his own children, but he adopted somebody else and raised them as his own. So obviously he never let go of being a man, ever. So any success, like I said, it's just a lie. His case came to international attention in 1997 when he told his story to Milton Diamond, an academic sexologist who persuaded Reimer to allow him to report the outcome in order to dissuade physicians from treating other infants similarly. Soon after Reimer went public with the story, and John Calipinto published a widely disseminated and influential account, Rolling Stone magazine in December 1997. The article won the National Magazine Award for reporting. So even though this kid went public and told this story as an adult, we can see that our Democrat policymakers here in America are still trying to push this gender ideology crap, even though they know it got somebody killed. The only time it had happened in the past, the guy ended up killing himself. So they don't have any evidence that this is going to help any of these kids. It's just them making it up. And in fact, there's evidence to the contrary. There's evidence that this will make people end up killing themselves in the future. So don't fall for the idea that if you don't accept a male as a female, that you're the reason they committed suicide. The only time that somebody converted in the past to a female, he ended up killing himself. And he was raised as a female since like the age of like under 2. So the idea that if you do it to a 6-year-old, he's going to be thankful to you, there's no evidence of that. In fact, it's just evidence to the contrary. So after that Rolling Stones report, the award-winning report, this was later expanded into the New York Times best-selling biography, As Nature Made Him. The Boy Who Was Raised as a Girl. It was released in 2000, in which Calipinto described how, contrary to Money's reports, when living as Brenda, Reimer did not identify as a girl. He was ostracized in school and bullied by his peers, who dubbed him the cave woman. And neither frilly dressed nor female hormones made him feel like a female or made him a female, just made him a boy on hormones. In addition to his difficult lifelong relationship with his parents, Reimer was unemployed and experienced remorse due to the death of his brother Brian from an overdose of antidepressants on the 1st of July 2002. On the 2nd of May 2004, his wife Jane told him she wanted to separate. On the morning of the 4th of May 2004, Reimer drove to a grocery store parking lot in his hometown of Winnipeg and shot himself in the head. He was 38 years old. He and Brian are buried in St. Vital Cemetery in Winnipeg. And just in case anybody wants to know, he used a shotgun to blow his head off. So, I think he wanted to make sure there was no opportunity that he would have to live anymore after all of the hard times and heartaches he went through. Many believe that transgender people had an ID fixate and established the Johns Hopkins Gender Identity Clinic in 1965. He would screen adult patients for 2 years prior to granting them a medical transition, and believed sex roles should be de-stereotyped, so that masculine women would be less likely to desire a transition. Money is generally viewed as a negative figure by everyone. He sounds like the original radical feminist, at least liberal one. Like the original liberal feminist. I hear they argue with each other about what radical feminism really is, so I don't know. I think feminism is garbage anyway. I don't really see why everyone would call themselves equal and then you need feminism to try to make you equal. I don't know. It's all just to separate us. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we have to respect one another for our differences. Like, men are good at some things, women are good at some things, so when we come together, we got the whole picture, you know? Anyway, in 1947, at the age of 26, Money had immigrated to the United States to study psychiatry at the Institute of the University of Pittsburgh. He left Pittsburgh and earned his PhD from Harvard University. That's where Kenzie had got his degree too. So it seems like Harvard just pushes out these weirdos, you know. Money proposed and developed several theories related to the topics of gender identity and gender roles, and coined terms like gender role and love map. He popularized the term paraphilia, appearing in the DSM-3, which would later replace perversions, and introduced the term sexual orientation in place of sexual preference. He also coined the term gender, arguing that attraction is not necessarily a matter of free choice. There goes those liberal feminist talking points again. They should call him a pedophile and the founder of liberal feminism. Despite the pain and turmoil of the brothers for decades, Money reported on Reimer's progress as the John Jones case, describing apparently successful female gender development and using this case to support the feasibility of sex reassignment and surgical reconstruction in non-intersex cases. Even though he knew it to be a lie, he knew it wasn't successful. And by the time his deception was discovered, the idea of a purely socially constructed gender identity in infants' intersex medical interventions had become the accepted medical and sociological standard. Even though they know it to be a lie, they're still pushing it. And this is years and years later, like 60 years later, they're still pushing the garbage they know didn't work 60 years ago. Anyway, in July 2002, Brian was found dead from the overdose on antidepressants, like I said earlier, and David would commit suicide in 2004. According to his mother, he had recently become depressed after losing his job and separating from his wife. Money argued that the media response to Diamond's expose was due to right-wing media bias. So he didn't want to take credit for lying the whole time. It was all because the right wing didn't like it, which is just crazy. And the anti-feminist movement, he said his detractors believed masculinity and femininity are built into the genes. Well, they are. So women should get back to the mattress and the kitchen. Those are his words. I don't ever hear anybody saying that. I mean, I think I hear a lot of people saying women should be at home raising their kids. And I can't disagree with that, because look what happens when you let these public schools raise your kids. They're telling them the same thing that John Money was telling the Raymer twins. So I think it's important that we have somebody, a parent at home raising the kids. I don't think it's sexist at all. If anything, it's a recognition of the differences between us. It has nothing to do with being sexist. Just to have a grip on reality that children need to grow up with a parent at home. However, intersex activists also criticized Money, stating that unreported failure had led to the surgical reassignment of thousands of infants as a matter of policy. Privately, Money was mortified by the case, colleagues said, and as a rule did not discuss it. Money believed that the de-stereotyping of sex roles might prevent people from wanting to transition, arguing a tomboyish girl prenatally androgenized grows up to be a career-minded woman, not a transsexual who claims to need sex reassignment. Yeah, he sounds like every liberal feminist I've ever heard talk. He sounds just like AOC. In 1965, Money co-established the Gender Identity Clinic at Johns Hopkins with the endocrinologist Claude Midgen. Money screened adult patients for 2 years prior to granting them a medical transition. I'm pretty sure it even takes less time now. They're trying to transition kids by the age of 2. And argued none regret the procedure as a result. Yeah, he's lying. The hospital began performing sexual reassignment surgery in '66, even though they knew he had been lying, and was the first clinic in the United States to do so. John Money was a leading proponent of the idea that human sexual orientation develops through learning and gendered socialization. He believed that males, if surgically reassigned and raised as girls around birth, would grow up to be attracted to males. When that was found to be false, he lied and falsified statistics in order to push this on other people. But and sometimes they could be attracted to males and live as heterosexual women. However, in the case of David Reimer, he grew up to be attracted to women. A 2016 academic review found that in 7 total cases of boys raised surgically reassigned and raised as girls due to botched circumcisions or cloacal exstrophy, all were strongly attracted to women. So it didn't take with anyone, not men, inconsistent with this learning theory of homosexuality. But they still pushing this on the kids now. In California, they do it in the public schools. The teachers do it, and they'll hide it from the parents. So, he also had coined the term chronophilia. Money coined the term chronophilia and nepophilia, sexual attractions to toddlers and infants. I guess he didn't think pedophile was nice enough. In 1986 and 2 1983 case study publications, Money stated that pedophilia, among other chronophilias, could be characterized as combining devotion and affection and limerence and comradeship with a touch of hero worship, and ultimately as harmless as most instances. So he's trying to argue that pedophiles should be looked at like heroes. He stated that both sexual researchers and the public do not make distinctions between affectional pedophiles and sadistic pedophilia. All of it's sadistic. They're hurting kids. According to Colapinto, Money told Pedica, a now defunct Dutch journalist of pedophilia, that if I were to see the case of a boy aged 10 or 12 who's intensely attracted towards a man in his 20s or 30s, if the relationship is totally mutual and the bonding is genuinely totally mutual, then I would not call it pathological in any way. So he doesn't see a problem with a 30-year-old man dating a 12-year-old. And there's still people that defend him and say that he's not a pedophile. But everything that I've heard of like, it describes him as a pedophile. There's no way you can take up for pedophilia, transition kids, take pornographic pictures of them, and then not be considered a pedophile. This guy was a pedophile, not a scientist. Also in 1986, Money postulated the existence of multiple chronophilic forms of erotic age role playing or age impersonation, which he named infantilism, juvenilism, adolescentilism, or gerontilism. So he found every way and tried to use any words he could come up with to try to make pedophilia okay. So yeah, I think it's safe for us to say in conclusion, after reading about Alfred Kenzie together and going over it, and then going into John Money together, I think it's safe to say that Pride was started by pedophiles, and Pride should be looked at as a pedophilic display, because that's what it is. It's pedophilia. They got people that cross-dress now on the side of the streets, dancing and shaking it in front of little kids. And there's parents that, most of them I see are like two mothers or two fathers that take their kids to it. They're not even real parents, they're adopted parents. They take their kids to this stuff and allow that to happen to their kids right in their faces. So I would argue that the government is pushing pedophilia. Not only the government, but the Pride Parade itself is pushing pedophilia, because it's a bunch of grown men shaking their penises or buttocks in kids' faces, and nobody does anything about it. So I think it's time for us all to get out here and start protecting the children, peacefully, of course. Like, don't do anything crazy and blame it on me. I didn't tell you to do it. I don't need the FBI kicking in my door. But either way, I hope this was an enlightening experience for everybody. I hope I did better than the previous shows. I hope everything worked out well and everybody could hear what I had to say. And I hope to see you all again sometime soon. Everyone have a good day. I'm going to sign off now. I hope you enjoyed the show. See you later.